Paris, July 27, 1794. The air was thick with fear, not the fear of kings or armies, but of one man's words. Maximilien Robespierre, the architect of terror itself, stood trembling beneath the gaze of the revolution he had once ruled. For the first time, the voice that had condemned thousands now struggled to defend its own life. The hall of the National Convention was suffocating with heat and whispers. Men who had once bowed their heads at Robespierre's speeches now watched him with suspicion and quiet satisfaction. He rose to speak, his pale face glistening with sweat, the green coat clinging to his narrow frame. For months he had sent others to the guillotine with cold conviction. Now his own words betrayed him. Each syllable cracked like glass, his usual authority dissolving into desperation. "The enemies of virtue," he began, "still sit among us." But the murmurs drowned him out. He scanned the faces. Barras, Tallien, Billaud Varennes. Men who once cheered his name now glared with silent vengeance. Something had shifted in the room, something irreversible. He faltered. The once feared incorruptible had become human, vulnerable, isolated, hunted. When he raised his hand to strike the table for attention, his voice broke. The chamber erupted, not in applause, but in defiance. Outside, Paris was restless. Rumors spread faster than smoke. Robespierre is finished. The streets that once shouted, "Vive Robespierre," now whispered curses into the night. By evening, soldiers were gathering at the Hôtel de Ville, loyal to him still, but uncertain. His enemies in the convention moved swiftly. They signed the orders. Robespierre, his brother Augustin, Saint-Just, and others declared outlaws. The man who had defined the reign of terror now stood on the edge of it. As darkness fell, he was escorted from the hall, silent, pale, his eyes hollow. Outside, the city lights flickered like the last candles of a dying god. The fall had begun, and Paris, the city he once ruled with ideals of justice and blood, was preparing to devour him. Midnight hung over Paris like a blade. Thunder rolled in the distance, echoing off the stone walls of the Hôtel de Ville. Inside, Robespierre sat hunched at a wooden table, his once proud figure now wrapped in silence and fear. The city that once obeyed his voice now trembled with rumors of his death. The air smelled of gunpowder and damp stone. The revolution's soldiers, once loyal to him, gathered outside, whispering, arguing, hesitating. They had come to protect him, yet every man felt the same chill. Protecting Robespierre meant dying with him. He looked around the dimly lit chamber. Saint-Just stood near the window, his face pale but determined. Augustin Robespierre, his younger brother, paced the floor like a man trapped between loyalty and despair. And across the room, Couthon, crippled and trembling, prayed beneath his breath. "France will remember," Robespierre murmured, staring into the candle flame. But the flame wavered, dying slowly as if mocking his faith. Outside, the storm broke. Rain lashed the windows. Across the city, soldiers loyal to the convention were on the march, their boots echoing through the empty streets. They carried one order: capture the traitors alive. A knock shattered the silence. A messenger stumbled in, drenched, his face ghost-white. "They've surrounded us," he gasped. No one spoke. Saint-Just reached for his sword. "Then we die as patriots," he said. But Robespierre shook his head. His voice was low, broken, almost human. "No, not like this. I have seen too much blood." He stood and walked toward the desk where a single pistol lay gleaming beneath the candlelight. His trembling hand hovered over it. "Better by my own hand than theirs," he whispered. Augustin cried out, "Maximilien, no!" But the roar of thunder drowned him out. The pistol fired. A scream tore through the room. The shot missed its mercy, shattering Robespierre's jaw instead of ending his life. Blood spilled down his chest, his body collapsing to the cold floorboards. He tried to speak, but only a gurgle came, the voice of terror itself, silenced by fate. Saint-Just knelt beside him, his face lit by the flickering candlelight. The incorruptible lay bleeding, not dead, not alive. His own revolution now turning on him. Dawn crept over Paris like a ghost. The city awoke to silence, and the kind that comes after too much blood has been spilled. In the cold gray light, a cart rumbled through the cobbled streets, carrying what remained of the revolution's fiercest voice. Maximilien Robespierre sat slumped among the condemned, jaw shattered, eyes vacant, face pale as death itself. The people gathered not in mourning but in disbelief. The man who had once declared himself the guardian of virtue was now a prisoner of the people's rage. His green coat was torn, his hands bound tightly with rope. Beside him sat Saint-Just, the young idealist who believed the blade could purify France, now silent, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The cart jolted forward. Each turn of the wheel echoed through the narrow streets like the ticking of a clock counting down the last seconds of tyranny. Children ran alongside, pointing, whispering, "That's him, the one who sent my father to the guillotine." Women turned away, clutching their shawls, afraid to meet his gaze. Robespierre tried to hold his head high, but pain dragged it down. The bandage around his face was soaked in blood. Every breath was a struggle, every movement a reminder of his shattered jaw. But worse than the pain was the sound, the slow, relentless cheers of the same mob he had once commanded. From the windows above, Parisians leaned out to see the fallen tyrant. Some spat, others laughed. The sky darkened again, clouds rolling in as if nature itself refused to witness what came next. Saint-Just finally spoke, his voice low, almost tender. "We die for the Republic still, Maximilien." Robespierre turned to him, tears mingled with blood. If he could have spoken, he might have said, "No, we die for pride." At the end of the Rue Saint-Honoré, the guillotine loomed, a dark silhouette against the pale dawn. The blade glistened like a waiting god, its wooden frame dripping from the last execution. The crowd roared as the cart stopped. The guards lifted him roughly. His knees buckled. Blood stained the platform. A hush fell over the square. Even those who hated him felt something. Pity, perhaps, or the eerie sense that the revolution was devouring its own soul. The square was filled before sunrise. Rain glistened on cobblestones as thousands gathered to see justice, or vengeance, served. The guillotine stood like an altar, its blade dripping with the ghosts of 1,000 souls. And now, the priest of terror would become its final sacrifice. A drumbeat rolled through the crowd, slow, relentless. Every strike echoed across the Place de la Révolution. Beating in time with the fear that once ruled the city, the condemned were led out one by one. Saint-Just went first, head held high, refusing to kneel. The crowd jeered, but he did not flinch. When the blade fell, there was no cry, only a whisper of wind and a drop of blood that landed near Robespierre's feet. Next came Augustin Robespierre, the brother who had followed him to the end. He smiled faintly, a smile that broke his brother's heart. Then came Lebas, Couthon and the others, and faces once powerful, now nameless in the tide of revolution. Each death struck like a hammer against Robespierre's soul. He watched, unable to speak, his shattered jaw bound tight with a filthy bandage. Blood seeped through the cloth as he breathed, his eyes burning not with fear but something deeper, disbelief. The incorruptible, who had spoken of virtue and purity, now faced the purest truth of all, that the revolution devoured its own. Finally, the executioner turned toward him. The crowd surged, screaming, spitting, chanting his name with hatred. "Down with the tyrant! Death to the butcher!" The guard seized him. He struggled weakly, pain twisting his face as the executioner tore away the bandage. A scream escaped his throat, a guttural, human sound that silenced even the mob. It was not the voice of power. It was the voice of a man realizing his end. They dragged him beneath the blade. The executioner raised his face to the crowd, showing them what terror looked like when it broke. Rain poured harder. The sky was gray steel, the air thick with smoke and thunder. Robespierre's eyes lifted once more. Perhaps he saw the ideals he once believed in. Liberty, virtue, justice, and all drowned in blood. Perhaps he saw nothing. The blade fell, a flash of light, a single, heavy thud, and with it, the reign of terror ended. The blade had fallen, the crowd had screamed, and then silence. Paris stood still, as if the revolution itself had taken its final breath. The guillotine dripped quietly in the morning light. A pale mist crept across the square, shrouding the faces of the crowd. Where moments ago there had been fury, now there was only emptiness. The hollow stillness of a city that had lost something it could not name. Robespierre's head lay in the straw, his pale eyes frozen open. The executioner held it aloft for the people to see, and the mob cheered as if victory had been reborn. But behind every shout was exhaustion, the sound of a nation that had seen too much death to understand what freedom meant anymore. By evening, the bodies were gone, the guillotine stood alone, rain falling on its wooden frame. The air smelled of rust, blood, and the faint sweetness of roses from a nearby stall. Children played in the square, unaware of what had been lost there that morning. The leaders of the convention congratulated each other in candle-lit rooms. "France is safe again," one said. But even as the words were spoken, shadows clung to the walls. They knew the truth. They had not ended the terror. They had merely replaced its face. Across Paris, whispers began. Some called Robespierre a monster, others a martyr. And in the darkness of their homes, widows and mothers whispered his name not in hatred, but in fear, because his ghost was everywhere. In the laws he wrote, in the ideals he twisted, in the silence that followed his fall. Years later, the guillotine would rust away, but its shadow would never fade. Historians would call it justice, poets would call it tragedy, and the people would remember only the feeling that once a man had promised to build paradise and instead built a nightmare.